Hello. I hope you're all good. Um, Today we are going to discuss about Dynamo. So this is another AWS service that one can utilize depending on what exactly they are looking for. So what is Dynamo? So Dynamo is a fully managed serverless NoSQL database service by AWS. It's designed for ultra-fast performance and seamless scaling, making it ideal for modern applications. So, what does fully managed mean? Dynamo, this means Dynamo handles everything for you, from hardware and software maintenance, scaling, backups. This means you don't need to worry about server setup, updates, and performance tuning. And it's serverless. There's no servers to manage or provision. And DynamoDB scales automatically based on your application's demands, whether you are handling few requests or millions per service. Meaning you are not going to be charged ahead of whatever scale you have. So your cost would be based on how much you have used. And NoSQL basically just means DynamoDB uh, is a schemaless and flexible database. You can store, retrieve data as key value pairs or documents, making it easy to work with and unstructured and semi-structured data. So I choose Dynamo. So the first one would be performance. Dynamo delivers consistent single-digit millisecond response times, which is ideal for real-time application. So it does not matter how much data you have, the response will still be fast. So that's the point, automatic scaling. Um, built-in security with encryption and IAM integration. DynamoDB keeps your data secure. Data backup and restore, easily backup and restore data to protect against accidental loss. So the core concepts of Dynamo is you have tables. So these are collections of items similar to tables in a relational database. So, and you have items. Each entry within a table is similar to a row. So you have you have the table, and then you have the items that you put inside that table. Attributes. So these are fields within each item, similar to columns, which store data. So you'd have like name, maybe surname, date, or created at, something like that. And use case for DynamoDB. So Dynamo is perfect for applications that need to scale automatically and handle large amounts of data with low latency. Common use cases would include e-commerce, gaming backends, real-time IoT applications, and mobile apps. So for us to get started with Dynamo, you must first interact with the CLI, the AWS command line interface, and then maybe you can use an SDK, whatever it is you choose. It's really up to you. So in this particular tutorial, we are going to use the SDK. This is the JAVASCRIPT SDK that will allow us to interact with the database and do all sorts of stuff, create tables, delete data, add and update. So yeah.
And now for something completely different.
So at first you will go to the console itself. So before you set up the SDK, there are things that you need to do, and it's different. There are different ways that you can do this, like using an SDK to interact with Dynamo. So there are two ways you can do this depending on the constraints that are put on your account. So some accounts may give you permission to only the AWS services. That means whatever you are doing, you will be giving permissions to the service so you can use the SDK. Okay, some would allow you to actually do it outside of AWS using that SDK. So this approach would require you to like link the SDK with the credentials for I am user in AWS. So this is what we are going to do. We are going to create an I am user and set it up or in the JavaScript environment, and so that we can interact with the database basically. So yeah, so from here, this is Dynamo. You can just open another tab, and we also need I am. Basically, what I am gives you is the ability to tell AWS I am such and such, and I want access to this service, and I want only these particular things from that service. And you can uh, basically choose what permissions you want, and this is important to make sure that you don't get permissions that you are not even using in your application. So in the I am panel, we are going to go to users. So we are going to create a user pool. No, not a user pool, just an I am user. So go on the corner here and click create user. We are going to call it Dynamo test, and you're going to click next. And here you can, there are three options, but you're going to choose this so that we can choose a policy for us to use. As I said, you have to tell, you create a user and then you give it the policies that that user should have access to. So you don't just give it everything. So since we are using Dynamo, we are going to search Dynamo. Because this is like an example we are learning, we are going to select this. So this is what it gives you. This is a bad idea, by the way. If you are doing this for like production, you have to granularly say that I want this particular permission, this particular permission, this particular permission. You just don't say Amazon Dynamo full access. This is a bad idea. So for education purposes, this you can use this, and for production, you have to like choose the actual permissions that you will be using. So yeah, and we click next now. So we have our permission, and we can click create user. So this is our new user that we have created. So when you go into the user, you can see this is the attached policy that we have. And what we need to be able to link this to our SDK is to create the credentials that we will use to connect it with. So we're going to choose third-party service and then click yes. So this is like just a description, and it's optional. You can choose not to have it, but I'll have it. So we can say Dynamo test description. So yeah, so now we have the credentials that are created. So you can download this, as it gives you the option to do that, and it's advisable you do that and store that safely, because if you lose that, you are not going to find it here. So what we need is to go back to our application. So basically, as a foundation or understanding, you need to create a project, a Node.js project, and you need to import these libraries. I will put them in the description so that it's easier for you to like use them. So you can click, you can, after adding this, you can type npm.install. Depending on the permissions you have, it might not allow you this. So for me, I need to add sudo and npm install. It asks me for a password, and there it will download you the packages that you need. So these are the packages. So close that, and then it's now time to configure the AWS CLI to be able, for us to be able to link with the SDK and be able to communicate with Dynamo. So now you can type AWS configure. So this now is asking for the access key. You can go back to the console and it's looking for this. So you can click copy and go back to VS Code and just paste in that. And the secret, you find it here, just copy and also paste. Region, if you don't know your region, it's usually here at the corner here. So while mine is showing global, my account is in US East 1. So we are going to go there and say US East 1. Your account will usually show, just mine is not showing at this moment. So we can click and then it asks for us for an output format. So usually it's JSON or YAML. I usually just put YAML. JSON is also fine, it's up to you, it's a choice. So now we are done setting the SDK up. So now what we can check is to say AWS dot, what's that command? Just go back. AWS configure list. So you can click that. Now it will show you that you do have an account that's linked. So we are good to go now. And so we are going to go to Dynamo. So this is Dynamo's console. So you can watch these videos just to get more of an understanding of it. So you can go inside here and create a table and call it say testman, and this is like a primary key, so you can give it any, and this is optional. I don't think you really need it, and you can click next. So as you can see, we have created this table. These are other existing tables for other projects, but we should wait for it to finish creating the table. So after that, we can go into the table itself and click explore. So as you can see, there are many options that you can have in here. So you can create an item in here. So you can call it James. And if you create that item, it will show up in the table. See? So this is basically a management tool for Dynamo. You can input data manually in here, but that's not what we are trying to do. We are trying to do this in with a JavaScript SDK. So we can go on top of action and delete table. Have to confirm and delete. So I'll leave this project in my GitHub. I'll leave a link in the video description. But basically, I went ahead and wrote the code that should be able to do that, because not many people prefer having to watch someone write code. It's just this video would just take too long. So I did just go ahead of time and do that. I'll share the code. Also, these are like information that you can easily find if you run around on AWS and find their documentation. So what we are mostly going to do is just explain what the code does, so that at least you understand what is happening. So if we go to create table, uh, you can see that we have, so make sure you have this as I mentioned, otherwise the code will not work. So you can go to index create table.js. So first you have to import the built-in functions for the library, and then for you to create a table you need the table name, the table that you are actually creating, and a primary key at least, because how it works is you need like something that's unique. So you can have like a primary key, but you don't have to say what the columns will be ahead of time. So it just depends on what you append when you're sending data there. All right. So with this, the attributes definitions, you have test ID as the primary key. So it's a string. So as you can see in Dynamo, the string is has an S, uppercase S, and number has an N, and binary has a B. So these are the data types that you can use to identify the type of data you are taking as your primary key. So for the key schema, basically it just says what does the primary key need to be. So there are two options here. You have a hash and a range. So a hash is like the way a SQL database works. You can have a primary key that's unique. This will be different from any other key that will be any other item that will be inserted in that table. That means it's special, it's what makes it different from other records. So that's the hash when you are using a hash. So a range is basically like you're using two things. So you're using a hash and a range. So a range is like what makes it different. A range behaves like a primary key. And the the primary key itself can be reused, but the range cannot. So you can have like a primary key called Kennedy and then with dates. This allows you to say, I want all records with primary key Kennedy. You see, that will pull everything that has Kennedy on it with different dates. You see, that's what makes it different. You can have same primary key but different range itself. So down here, the provisioned throughput area is just something to do with read and write speeds. So read capacity unit specifies the number of strongly consistent reads per second that Dynamo can handle for the table, and its default is 1. Setting it 1 is minimal, which helps keep costs low. And write capacity unit specifies the number of writes per second that Dynamo can handle for a table. This is also set to 1 here for minimal cost. So you can make it higher, but it will be connected to how much cost you will have. So we have this function that will be called here, and it will run all this code. So we are creating a table, and its primary key is test ID, and it's a string, and we are using a hash for uniqueness. So we just have to run this code now. So to run this code, we have to run node and say what's the name, index create table.js and run it. So as you can see, it's showing us basically our metadata about the code that we created, and it's showing the status of the results of what we have done. So we can go back to Dynamo. As you can see, this is how we left it. So we can just refresh. So as you can see, we have created the table and its primary key is test ID. So we can go inside and go to explore. See that currently the table is empty. So for adding content, we can close this. It's in this script. I'll rewrite the names properly so they are easier to understand for you. Maybe not. I don't know. I'll leave it in GitHub so you can look for yourself. So this code is intended to create items in the database. So as you can see, we have the name. This is the name of the database. And if you notice, this is the create one. The functions are different. This one has a create command. This one is the same, but it has a create command that is being used here to create a table. If you go into the index one, it has put. That means you are trying to put objects into our table. This is the same one. So this is the function. We are trying to put content in the table. So as I said, let's just this is trying to create, say, a unique date, so that when you are posting content into the database, it should show you that, okay, this is a record, it was entered at such date. That's all that is for. And the crypto library is used to generate a random string. So the random string, as I communicated, is when you have a primary key. So the primary key should be always unique. The reason is, if you have the same primary key, it will always rewrite the old information. It will never like add another item on top of that. So if the key is the same, the data is overwritten. So you don't get like different information. So it's important to make sure that the primary key is different, so that it's like a next record in the index that you are inputting data. So test ID was our unique ID. So as you can see, where is it? Here. So as you can see, this is our partition. It's called a partition key here, but it's basically a primary key. That's why I've been calling it a primary key. So it's a string. As you can see, the big S is a string. It's a string data type. That's why that's string here. So test ID is our like primary key, and test ID here. This can be different, and you can see we are now adding columns that did not exist when we are when we are defining the table basically. So you have name and last name, and this is the date just being generated here. It doesn't have to be there, but just I don't know, I felt like adding more information. So you have the name, north face, and north, and last name face. So let's run this. So node index.js. So this will insert the unique ID, the name, the last name, and the date. So you have to go back here and explore table, uh, refresh. So as you can see, we have a record. This is the unique ID, and this is our date, and this is our last name and name. So let's add a few records. So we can add Candy, Lindsay, and let's run it. Let's add another one, James. James Japan. So we insert it. So now we have 3 records, as you can see. North Face, Kennedy Lindsay, and James, not even James. James Japan. That's okay. So so that's what this does. It creates content into the table. So what if we wanted to get a record? So to get a record, we use the get item. So here, this function, as you can see, if you looked closely here, this like SDK functions are different depending on what you want to do. So keep an eye on that. I think this stuff seems similar, but the functions usually change and how they work. So just make sure you notice them. So this one is a function for getting a record basically. So you point to what table you are talking about, and this is the unique ID. So what we want is a record from who? let's say Gem Japan, and we are going to go into here. Let's delete this and paste the unique ID for Gem Japan and run node index get item table to JS. Hopefully we didn't make a mistake. Get item. Okay. So as you can see, we have like information, just metadata of what happened with the transaction, and but this is the content that we are receiving. So as you can see, the date, the last name, and the unique ID, and the name itself. So yeah, so what if we wanted to update? So the function is also, but imagine if I had to write all this stuff while the video is going on. I think it would take a lot of videos to be able to just do this. So basically this is the updating table. So we have the values with the new information. So this is the content, this is the unique ID you are targeting, the new name and last name. So expression is like you are saying I want basically in like MySQL you say I want this column to be equal to that. I want this column to be equal to that. So this is basically what's happening here. So as you can see, you have this and you're assigning it to this, so which is down here, you see. So you're connecting these keys to these keys. These are just placeholders, they not matter. Okay, ignore this, they are placeholders, you can put anything in there. So and you are passing the information to these keys that are being passed here when you are trying to run the query, and then this gets the response of whatever happened. So whose name are we trying to change? So let's change Kennedy Lindsay. So you have to put the key here and paste. And what are we going to give Kennedy? It's going to be called Malawi, and his last name is going to be called East Africa. Yeah, so Malawi and East Africa, and then the table is the same. So this connects, and yeah, so we have to also run this code. So it's node index update item and table to JS. So if we run this, should wait. Yeah, so it's always showing that it has updated that record with Malawi and East Africa's last name on this record. So if we go back to Dynamo and refresh, you're going to see that Kennedy has changed to Malawi and surname East Africa. So that's basically it, using trying to use Dynamo from an SDK. So for your information, this is V3. V2 looks quite different and it's odd. If you use V2 when you are looking in the documentation, avoid using V2 because the V2 is odd. It's almost being deprecated at this time. It will even give you errors when you're trying to use it. So I'll leave this code. I'll leave a link to this code in my GitHub so you can implement it and try it yourself. So make sure you have imported these and you have created an IAM user for your practice, and you should download it, because if you lose it, it's gone. And what else? Yeah, so that's basically how you can use AWS JavaScript SDK to manipulate the to create, update, delete in Dynamo. So yeah, I hope you liked the video, and if you liked it, click like and leave a comment if you have any other questions. But I hope it's straightforward. It's quite, the code will be in the dependencies will be in the description, and I'll leave a link to GitHub so that you can use the code for whatever you want to use it for. So yeah, have a great day.